Hi guys, I'm really excited. I have just finished a brand new sentiment pack. This one's called Through the Garden Gate, and it has 33 different sentiments, all in the theme of gardening and flowers and nature. You've seen me use these on projects before, and I've added some new sentiments and quotes into here, played with some different fonts, and I'm really excited about how this looks. So I was getting ready to do some pages on this using the sentiments that I have, and lo and behold, one of the prompts for this week was Garden Gate. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to do 4 ICADs all in the theme of gardening. I just want to talk about my sentiment packs. They come to you in digital form in a PDF. Now the PDF locks the fonts and the formatting in place. So what I have on my computer, you get to bring up on your computer. Now that doesn't mean that you cannot adjust the sizes. Now here's where it gets tricky. You should be able to adjust the size in some way through your printer settings. Now every printer is different, and I can't possibly give you all the possibilities of how you're going to get this to work. But keep trying. You're going to look for words that say scale, because if you can scale it, you can scale it 25% of the original size. You can also, if there's a button there that says print on 2 pages or 2 pages on 1, what that will do is take the page, here are the originals, and it prints them 2 on 1 and basically shrinks the size. So look for both of those things on your printer settings, scale or how many pages per page, and you should be able to shrink them down. So for today's project, what I've done is I've shrunk it down to 2 pages on 1 page. So again, this is the original, this is the shrunken page in the smaller size, because while I love having them bigger for 5x7 pages and up, if you are doing something smaller, you may want a smaller quote. I could put 4 pages on here and even get them smaller, and that would be perfect for ATCs. So if you buy my sentiment pack, you have my permission to take them and shrink them down, to use them on whatever size you are creating. I want these to be usable. I want them to give you lots of ideas and lots of choices for how to use them. So hopefully that helps. So here's a sneak peek of the first art journal, ICAD, for this week. And I started with the quote, "Be like a flower, turn your face to the sun." And you can see I've cut them all into the rectangular shapes. Now, starting with that quote, I knew I wanted kind of sunflower colors. So I flipped through my blank pages that I've done a jelly printing session right at the beginning, and you can go back and watch that if you wish. And I am going to put the sunflower on here. Now, my plan from the beginning was that I was going to do the removing paint through the stencil technique. Well, you'll see what happens. But before I get there, I wanted to add a little bit more detail, a little more interest to the background. So I'm grabbing my script stamp. And the reason I'm grabbing the script stamp, other than I just love the look of the little bit of script peeking through, it's a fine scale. It's a smaller scale. And that just works so well. Later on, you're going to see me doing something similar with a different kind of stamp, because the script stamp isn't the only one. Now, when I'm using the removing paint through a stencil technique, you want to make sure that the surface is non-porous. So what I'm going to do here is put a layer of clear gesso on it. That's going to prime the surface, and it's going to make it easy for me to lift the paint through the stencil. And there's a reminder, if you don't already follow me on Instagram at Creative Katie. So I'm taking black Liquitex Basics, I thin it down, and I'm applying it to the entire surface. Now I'm placing the stencil on here and I'm grabbing a baby wipe and I'm going to remove the paint through the stencil. And what we're going to see, or my hope is that we're going to see the sunflower in this black background. And when I flipped it like this, I really didn't like it. So I kept going with the baby wipe and I got it back pretty much to the end. And the reason I was even able to do that is because I did put the clear gesso on. I brightened it up a little bit with colors. I'm adding a little bit more stenciling with this Harlequin stencil. And I'm going to basically do the reverse. I'm going to stencil with black. So the sunflower is going to be black and the background is going to be colored. Now there was a little bit of this teal in the background and I liked how that worked with the colors. So I thought, I'm going to play that up. I'm going to splatter it with some more teal. Positioning the stencil and, with in mind what sentiment I'm going to put on there. And I put 2 layers of the black paint. You want the sponge to be almost dry. I dip into the paint and then I tap off on the mat. And I like how this font works with the shape of the sunflower petals. It just seems to work together. And the font that I've chosen here is a little bit bolder, and so it's going to stand up. Now, these sentiments, you can take and cut them however you like. You can use them in the rectangular shape as they are, or you can cut out a lot of the white paper. You can colorize them. You can do all sorts of things with them. So here I'm just playing with, where do I want this to go? And sometimes I stop and take a picture with my camera and look and see which one do I like better. Now I have black paint on the sponge, so I'm just going around and I'm edging the page. I decided I want a little bit more definition, so I grabbed my Jelly Roll pen, and this is a white and it's bold. It's size 10. This is permanent when it's completely dry. Like right now, if I took a baby wipe, I would be able to get it off, but the next day I would not. And I just wanted to add a little bit more detail on it. I could have also used black modeling paste here, and that would have given it a little bit of texture as well. And with this gel pen, if you go slower, and it's hard to tell because this is sped up, if you go slower, it flows easier. If you go too fast, it tends to start skipping. I wanted my eyes to start at the top and go down, so I kept cutting the sentiment to get that flow. After a quick dry, I'm grabbing my fine line applicator and I am going around to get a white edge. Now the reason I'm using the applicator and not the gel pen is I want it a little bolder, a little bit thicker. And this gives me those things. Using my Sakura glaze pen black to go around the sentiment, and it just frames them. Makes everything pop. And we're done. Number 1. Here's a sneak peek of number 2, Life Began in a Garden. So I have my background, and since it's Life Began in a Garden, I grabbed this Jungle Vines stencil. I love this stencil. Now, initially I'm thinking I wanted to go teal because I had teal on the other one. doing a sneak peek. It's not exactly doing what I want it to do. It's not bold enough. I just not getting what I envisioned. So I decide to change it up. I'm just getting the baby wipe, and I can do that because this gel print is completely dry and it's acrylic paint. And then I'm just putting a little bit of that teal around everywhere, just adding a background color. Remember, your gel print or your collage papers are the jumping off point. They are the beginning of your color story or pattern story, but you can add to it. Now I'm using the quinacridone magenta through this stencil to get this leaf motif into the background. Now remember this conch shell that I used to make this wind chime? This is the stencil. When I did this, I had turned it upside down at one point. I put them on put modeling paste through a stencil onto tissue paper. And when I turned it upside down, they looked like flower buds. I combine them, I can make a little bit of a magnolia, and I was playing with these shells. And I felt if I use all of these, I can use 5, I can use 6, make a flower with that. And so that's what I chose to do for this one. And as I was playing around with it today, I came upon another idea where I can use those same shells to create yet another one. Now here I am testing out a bit of a technique. If you use a lot of matte fluid medium right now, the tissue paper goes completely translucent. But sometimes when there's a black background, it doesn't quite. You have to use an awful lot of the matte medium. What I chose to do was I'm spraying the tissue paper with water first and then using the matte medium. And this works like a charm. You can see that they go translucent. When it dries, it keeps that translucency. And that was a trick. I was watching somebody that does decoupage, and they wet the napkin. I'm adding a little bit of script stamp here. My background's a little too plain for my liking. I just want a little script stamp in between, so I'm masking off the other parts. And I'm going to splatter with some white. That shell also makes, I mean, I look at that and I can see a snowflake too, so it's amazing what you can do with a part of a stencil. Grabbing the black paint that's in this fine line applicator and going around here. And again, I want it a bit bolder, so I'm choosing the fine line applicator as opposed to the Secura glaze pen. And there we have ICAD number 2 for this week. Here's the inspiration for ICAD number 3. This is from my garden right now. The echinaceas, coneflowers are in full bloom, and here is the art journal page that I created. So in this one, I am using this stamp set from Tim Holtz called Flower Garden, and I'll put a link to it and other ones. And I'm using some rice paper. Now, rice paper collages down really well. It also has more shape to it than tissue paper. So it's easier to cut out. And this was really, these flower heads were really fine. So I wanted something with a little bit more substantial, so to make it easier to cut out. So I'm mixing orange, magenta, and deep violet to get the colors of the coneflower. And I'm doing a whole sheet of this because I know what I don't use today, I'm going to put in my stash and I can use it at another time. But I could paint on any one of these rice papers and have that as an Insta background. So here I'm using archival ink and I'm stamping, and you can see how detailed this stamp is, but how fine it is. It's not, the line work isn't very bold at all. So really I cut these out and they sat there, and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to have to shade. And then quite by accident, because I had everything out, I discovered that if I take the black paint and I spray water on it to make it kind of liquidy and stamp with it, you get this watercolory look with kind of builds in the shading. And I absolutely love how dark that is and the extra little bit of interest that it adds doing it this way. See, it petals there, and each one's kind of different, which I love. So you can see the difference. So just sheer luck. So I went back and I stamped the ones that I cut out, and I'm liking that look too. It's not exactly perfect, but it doesn't have to be. So try that with your stamps. Now, if you're using acrylic paint with your stamps, take the time to spray it with Murphy's oil soap mixture and clean it before you move on. Otherwise, it's going to clog up your stamp and you will wreck it. So then I'm fussy cutting, sort of. I'm not doing a great job. I'm leaving a line there. It doesn't have to be so very precise. And no, I'm not going to make you watch me cut all of them. Now I have this background, another gel print, and I believe this is called Link Tiles, that's stenciled to create that gel print. And I'm stamping it with this deep red water droplet stamp. And it has smaller scale stamp, so it's perfect for a background too, much like what I did with the script stamp. I'm placing these on here, and then I'm trying out the sentiments, the different sentiments that from the pack. And I'm looking for, does the font match the feeling of the page, the size, the boldness, trial and error. And I decided to go with this one. The shortest path to heaven is through the garden gate. Now, the Tim Holtz Flower Garden stamp set has stems, so I'm dipping it in that wet or watered down acrylic paint, kind of that watercolor look, and stamping the stems. I could have just painted these on. So I'm putting the stems, drying them, and finding, and now I'm positioning where I want the cones of the flower heads to go. And I decide in all my playing around and with the sentiment, which is now at the top, you'll notice, that I wanted to add part of another cone flower. It just seemed to be needed to balance everything out. I know we usually talk about keeping it to odd numbers, but I think with the sentiment, it just seemed to be necessary to weigh it out. So there are rules, and then feel free to break those rules at times. I am using here the professional version of the fluid matte medium just because I got a good deal for it because I bought it in a larger quantity. But the Liquitex Basics fluid matte medium that I've linked in the Amazon store works equally as well for what we're using it for here. So after giving that a dry, I am edging it with black paint on a makeup sponge. If you're interested in the Through the Garden Gate sentiment pack that you're seeing here, or any of my other sentiment packs, they are available at Ninny's Napkins, and there's a link right at the top of the description box. And you can go get a closer look at them, and they're available as an instant digital download. Outlining with my Sakura glaze pen. And a few splatters. And there we have all three. And here's the sneak peek of number 4. I'm not pushing the season, but I love this quote. And just like that, summer fell into fall. And I knew I wanted to use this wheat stencil. I've been just itching to use it. So I pulled it out, and then I pulled out this napkin from Ninny's Napkins. I'm looking at that sunflower because to me that is a sign of fall. Now for the background, I'm choosing a dark navyish blue because I know that the gold of the sunflower and the gold that I'm going to use for the wheat are really going to pop off that background. Now, this page had a gel print that I didn't like, and I had brayered over it with white paint. So now that I put blue on it, there is texture and interest in it. And you're not going to see much of it, so I'm leaving it pretty simple. So I'm just using my liner brush here to water cut the sunflower. I will put a link to the video where I use this sunflower napkin in a different way to create an art journal page that I absolutely loved. So I'm playing around with the composition. Do I need more than one? And I decide, okay, let's put the wheat on here. And by playing it, doing it this way, I came across an idea for it to kind of go here. And I'm using the Champagne Gold modeling paste from the Crafter's Workshop. Love this stuff. Had to crack open a brand new container of it. And there, like it just pops. You don't even need anything more than this. Now I've placed the sunflowers down at the bottom. And now I'm figuring out how I want to take the sentiment, and I'm cutting it apart so I can make it flow and it can fit onto the page. As well, I'm getting rid of any of the excess white. I love how that wheat is coming out of that sunflower. Now, if I put or glued the sunflower down on top of the blue background, it would get very dark and lose some of its vibrancy. And I wanted it to stay yellow, so I'm just giving a coat of gesso for the place underneath where I'm going to glue down the sunflower. And you can see where the white was, It stayed bright and light, and there's that little bit of tip where I didn't get the gesso, it's darker. And I did that deliberately. I wasn't trying to get it exactly perfect because I figured there will be shadows, there will be other things going on. Now I'm just gluing everything else down. With the fluid matte medium. That has become a staple in my studio. And you can see the yellow and the blue are almost across from each other on the color wheel, which is why it pops so well, why they have such vibrancy to get when we've used them together. So by my calculation, we have one more week of index cards to go in this year's, in 2020. Not sure what theme I'm going to pick. I hope you come back and see it. And then after that, there will be a flip through of all of the ones. There's some close-ups of pictures here. Let me know which one is your favorite. I hope you try these techniques. As always, have fun being creative.